4W Circle was a dream that had a couple of different pieces to it. The first was at the age of 15, my dad had his own business, and I worked for him that summer. My mom had been sick, and he says, "You're going to have to help out." And at the end of that summer, I said, "When I get older, I'm going to have my own business." And fast forward some 25 years later, I had an opportunity to go to West Africa. And in that experience, I saw something that I didn't really see here in the United States, where the host church that cared for us, I mentioned that there were some things I wanted, and they said, "Okay, we'll take you to the market." And one booth didn't have what I wanted, and they said, "Well, we'll take you over to the one over here." Or the owner of that booth would make a recommendation as to where else I could go. And I thought that was quite unusual that someone would recommend me to another store, so to speak. And it kept happening every time we went to market. And then when I got back here in the United States, a friend of mine, Lois Bell, wanted to go visit her mom's place of birth in Charleston, South Carolina. And when we got there, there was a slave market, the former slave hall, and they turned it into a marketplace. And I experienced the same thing, that if you went to one space and they didn't have it, they'd recommend that you go to another location right in the marketplace. And Lois and I got to talking about that, and we said, we should have something like that in New York. And that was the very beginnings of thinking about 4W Circle of Art and Enterprise. Lois and I had been friends for a long time, but I had met some other women who were also interested in starting a business, and that was Sheila Kennedy and Aquanetta Russell Brown. And the four of us got together, and what we noticed was that every time we met around a round table. And there were four of us, and we were all women. And so we said, okay, what are we trying to do? And we wanted to be able to help others. And so 4W actually stands for Women Working and Winning for the World. And we said, oh, we'll just name it 4W for short. And we sit around a round table, so it'll be 4W Circle. And then it was, well, it's about business and all. And so then it became art and enterprise. And that's what we went with. The founders of 4W Circle all had very different backgrounds. Lois worked in a hospital lab. Sheila worked for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and she worked in marketing. Aquanetta Russell Brown was an accountant for the Agency for Child Development, and I was just recently out of employment, and I had worked for a bank for 15 years. I worked for a chemical bank. And we kind of struggled initially about our own backgrounds, and we thought that we would each have a business within the store. And probably a couple of months into it, we said, wait a minute, how much do we really know about retail? And why don't we instead divide this space up and bring in different artists and let them be the retailers? And then I started talking about the marketplace in West Africa and again in Charleston, South Carolina. And so we said, okay, let's go with that idea. Trying to come up with how we would select the artists. As I say, at first we were thinking we would be the business owners. And then we started looking around. We came up with ideas about different artists that we personally liked. And we said, well, let's first find a place and then we could figure it out from there. And we found a location, and we got a big window sign that we said, looking for local artists. And we figured, well, if it works in the supermarket, why can't it work for us? And that was how we started getting people contacting us about wanting to be a part of the space. Getting started really wasn't difficult. We started planning in August of 1990, and we opened our doors in March of 1991. And we opened with six businesses. And after our very first day, we had four others that wanted to join the space. When we first started 4W, we said, "Oh, well, we'll be in business, and we kind of thought about 5 years, um, and we were all pleasantly surprised when we celebrated our 10th anniversary, and it lasted another 7 years after that. So we had no idea. It was very new, very different. But we decided to take a stab at it and see where it took us. The When we first started the business, we wanted to buy a space, and we couldn't find a place that we could purchase. And over the years, we constantly looked for a place to buy, because what we were constantly challenged with was having renewing our lease and the rent going up every time we renewed it. And we were concerned about being priced out of the market at some point along the way. We tried to make an offer to our landlord, and a couple of times he said yes, and only when we came back with, okay, we're ready to go, did that change. And then we asked ourselves whether we should stay in the same place or move to another location. And we were struggling with that decision, but we thought we would stay where we were. And when we selected artists, we really thought we had a solid footing on who would be there. And we found ourselves with three artists that actually left in a short period of time. And what was interesting about that was they were businesses that were managed and owned by men. And we realized men will make a quick jump and keep moving. We had several women business owners, but one of the ones that stayed with us the longest was Tribal Truths, and that was run by Brenda Brunson Bay. And she left us and opened up her own space, as well as two of the businesses owned by men. They also left and opened up their own spaces. Chris Creations, which I believe is still functioning on Washington Avenue, and one by Danny. And Danny actually got sick and passed away, so that's really why his business was. But he was there, I think, close to 6 years. He had his business on Atlantic Avenue. I think those were the three strongest, and businesses that then went on to open up on their own. And then we had some that came just to visit for a period of time, and others that are still vending. They will do the African Dance Africa in different marketplaces. But I can't say that there were a lot. Melody Burns, she moved out and moved into other spaces, had her own shop. So she's still also creating artwork and selling jewelry. Different artists came with different products. One of the things that we were very concerned about and really felt very strongly about was having different product lines from each one of the artists. We didn't want two artists selling the same merchandise, so that there was a variety when a customer came into the store. And we were very, I guess you would say, strict about that, especially in the very beginning. We had a clothing designer, Brenda Brunson Bay. Chris Creation, when he started, he was actually selling handbags. And jewelry was some designed by Danny, and some of Danny's product he purchased on the open market. And then we had a children's clothing line that some of you may know, Celeste Morris. She was the business owner for the children's clothing line. We had a young lady who made gift baskets, as well as having toys for children. One of the things that became very apparent to us very early on, even though we said we were only going to lease space to individuals, was that we needed greeting cards and gift wrap and small gift items. And so that became the 4W owner's business in the space. And that probably started about 6 months after we opened. It wasn't something that we initially went into business to do, but we also felt that we needed to serve a need that the customer was asking for. And so that became our business. So in that sense, we were there for the duration of 4W Circle. The gift shop, the greeting cards and the gift wrapping was available for all of the business owners when customers purchased things from them. If they wanted it gift wrapped for their customer, 4W Circle would do the gift wrapping. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that our gift wrap during Christmas and during Mother's Day was handled by teenagers in the neighborhood, and they were able to get part-time work to come in and do gift wrap. And the customers really appreciated it. They loved the different types of paper that they could get. And especially during the Christmas holidays, the young teenagers got tips for their gift wrapping, and they just thought this was the best thing since sliced bread, you know. They were excited about the work they did. We initially started with each one of the business owners, Lois, Sheila, Aquanetta, and myself. We each worked in different business settings, and we were able to reach out to our network and have our co-workers support us, and that was extremely important. We all belong to a church. 3 of us belong to Bridge Street right here in Brooklyn, and one belonged to an AME church in the Bronx. And we invited our church members. We had our families inviting people. My mom was upset about me going into business, but she lived in the Bronx as well, and she would tell her neighbors, you got to go out to Brooklyn to my daughter's store. And they would come in, who's Selma? And I'd identify myself, and they'd say, your mother sent me. So it was always good to know that she was in support. And then as we began to grow, customers would tell their relatives who would come in from out of town, when you get off the plane, make your first stop 4W Circle. We would have people coming in from Florida and Nevada and California, and they would stop at the store with their luggage before they went to their relatives' home. And that was really very heartwarming that our customers thought that much of us, that they would tell their relatives from out of town, make sure you make it to 4W Circle. The question about whether we wanted to share the business with the different members of the collective, and how were we handling the rising rents and gentrification, came up a lot. We would discuss it as a collective. And at the point where I was thinking about letting go, because it came up again for another lease renewal. I asked all of the business owners, would anyone like to take it on, or would they like to take it on as a collective? And I remember the response was, I don't want to work that hard. And I was stunned a little bit. And then I said, oh, okay. I'm here working so that it's possible for you to be here, but it really is something that is important to you and your business. Most of you are creating your own product, and here's an opportunity for you to continue. And they said no. And so I said, okay, but I want you to understand that I'm about ready to hang up my boots. And I had already crossed the 60s threshold, so it wasn't like I was bowing out at a young age. What I did decide to do, though, the store had, in the front of the store, there were different clothing and artists and jewelry merchandise. In the back of the store was a hair salon. And they had been with us since about 2000, and this was 2007. And I went back and I asked one of the stylists, that was one of the partners, would they be interested in having the space? And they said, let's think about it, but we may want to discuss that with you further. And I said, okay. We let some time go by, and they didn't take it initially. And then maybe a couple of months after I closed, I got a call. And the response was, I've changed my mind. I'm interested in the space. The landlord had asked me if I could recommend anyone to him to continue in the space. And I called him and I said, I have someone that's interested in continuing the space. And so the salon that's there now used to be one of my tenants. Glenn Etienne, who has the lease with the landlord, he manages the whole space. And at one point, he just had locks throughout the store and different hairstylists renting a chair. As part of what was going on with the gentrification, the barbershop that used to be in the bus stop, which is now where I believe the tattoo shop is or the pizza parlor, was priced out of their space. Glenn moved all of the locticians' chairs into the front of the store, and that barbershop is now renting from Glenn on the back of his store. And he's been there now 11 years. So some people say to me, oh, I'm so upset that 4W is gone and what you had started isn't there anymore. And I said, no, you don't quite understand. One of the tenants that I had actually now has the lease for the space, and he's continuing in that tradition of making it available to other businesses as well. Oh, memories of Fort Greene. There's so many memories. There's the collaboration amongst the businesses. Whenever Dance Africa came in May, the businesses would get together and we would have a little event that would go on. And so when customers came up on that section of Fulton Street, they could go to 4W, they could go to Moshood, they could go to I'm drawing a blank, but a couple of the other businesses. There was a bookstore there. Salif was there with the Kirandai, and the folks would just go from one business to another, and we would have an event or something special that would take place during that weekend of festival. I'm also reminded of the time that 4W had its fire. And I never felt so much love from the community as when that took place. The landlord initially said, "Do you want to stay?" And we said yes. And he said, "Okay, we'll get to working on that." It happened 4 days before Mother's Day. There used to be a hardware store, Seven Corners hardware store at the corner, and a lot of our merchandise that was in the basement had not been damaged, but there was some water that could have, really messed with it. Allison, who was the store manager, came over to me and she said, "I want you to empty out as much as you can from the basement that's still salvageable and put it over in my store. I have a space for you to store it. And this way you can, if you have product coming in, you can have them ship it to me or just tell the delivery guy, UPS, to bring your merchandise over and I'll store it for you." Moshood called me and he said, "I need you to come over. I want to talk to you about something." And when I got there, and this is all before Mother's Day, he says, "I'm moving everything in my store to one side, and I want you to set everybody else up with product on the other side." And I said, "Moshood," he says, "don't argue with me. This is what we do in our village when someone needs help. And I want you to," I still get really bold with that. He says, "I want you to stay here until your store reopens." And then to top it all off, the community got together and threw a benefit for us at the South Oxford Tennis Club and raised about $6,000 or $7,000 for us to help us reopen. So it was such an overwhelming and such a joyful time that I really got the experience of how community and how businesses can support one another. So that vision of going from one booth to another in Africa came full circle, that all of the businesses in the Fort Greene community reached out to help 4W Circle. My name is Selma Jackson, and I am one of the 4 founders of 4W Circle of Art and Enterprise, and we were located at 704 Fulton Street, right between South Oxford and South Portland avenues, South Oxford Street and South Portland Avenue, for 17 years, from 1991 until 2008. 4W Circle was a member of the Merchants Association, and we decided that that Merchants Association would be called Bogalon. Bogalon is short for Bogolafini, or mudcloth, and we chose that name because the Avenue, Fulton Street area was so diverse in terms of the different places that people emanated from. And as we continued to progress and became a strong organization, we were able to get banners that we had up on the flagpole throughout the district. And this is one of the Bogalon flags that used to be displayed on Fulton Street before they changed it to the FAB bid. And I'm thinking that this was when right after we had the fire, because it says 4W on the move. It was either that or whenever we would vend as a business, we used this when we were out in public. This is a collection of a collage of different photographs of events that occurred at 4W Circle over the years. I believe this was for our 13th anniversary, or it may have been created as we were planning to close. This was done by one of the artists, last name was Jeffries, Katrina Jeffries, She was a pottery artist. She had dishes and cups and mugs, and then she would do some special pottery crafts. But she captured the activity that goes on in 4W Circle with many of the photographs that appear in this collage. This is a collage that was created by Katrina Jeffries, one of the pottery artists, business owners at 4W Circle. And it was either done for our 13th anniversary or when we were getting ready to close, and we had a big celebration for our closing. And this is a collection of photographs that really captures the essence of 4W Circle. Some of the special guests that we had over the years, the work that we did with children at different points along the way, some of the fashion shows, and just the excitement that was in the space for 17 years.
Okay. Yep.
There's, was it Melba Moore's in here?
Let me
Wow.
see. Let me
I
find
was
Melba.
fine. I was
Su-
fine.
Susan,
Let's see.
Susan Taylor.
Wow.
Oh, let's see if we can find Melba. Oh, I see Susan Taylor.
Oh yeah. I forgot. What is his name? He was there. Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
remember him.
Wow, this is beautiful.
I see
Oh,
Melba
Melba
Moore
right
down
there.
here.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Did you keep it like I guess like in a dark, cool place so
This
it
is
won't
so
fade
cool.
anymore, right?
No, it was never very,
To
sharp,
begin
because
with,
what she
okay.
did was, I think she scanned the photos.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, beautiful. You ladies are beautiful too. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Whose paper is this? This is your paper?
Yeah.
Melba? Okay.
That's my stuff.
Okay, I'm cutting.
I said, Lord, I hope they missed me with the camera just now.